Imagine an alternate Pokemon universe, a world where the entire type chart is inverted. It's a Pokemon metagame where water is scared of fire, fairies quiver in fear of the dragon type, and normal types dominate the metagame. It's a world where Indeedee is banned, Avalugg is the best defensive Pokemon, and Steel is so terrible that Dialga and Necrozma Duskmane are unbanned because their terrible type makes them manageable. What's interesting is that the metagame is not just an inversion of the normal metagame. That would be pretty boring to talk about. There's actually some fundamental changes that cascade from the inverted effect and that makes the inverted metagame fundamentally different. This video talks about the Generation 9 inverse metagame on Pokemon Showdown, but it's important to acknowledge the predecessor, the root of the whole metagame. Inverse battles were created in Pokemon X and Y where you could fight one particular NPC in an inverse battle. This character set the definition for what exactly an inverse battle is. What inverse means is that super effective attacks become not very effective, neutral attacks stay neutral, not very effective attacks become super effective, and immune attacks also become super effective. Also, Stealth Rock is affected by the inverse effect, which is a big change we'll talk about later. And here's something cool. At one point, there was actually an inverse battle ladder in the actual games. It was one of those special rotating ladders where they try out fun formats in a limited time. That format didn't have any bans besides restricted legendary Pokemon, and it was dominated by Mega Kangaskhan and Mega Gengar. Normal is an incredible type both offensively and defensively, and it is arguably the best type in inverse battles. Offensively, nothing is able to resist a normal type attack, and defensively, only Ghost is super effective on normal. For those of you who don't know, Mega Kangaskhan was already an incredible Pokemon in standard play. In fact, it got nerfed because it was way too good, and that was for regular play. Now imagine what it looks like in an inverse metagame. Mega Kangaskhan became even stronger. It was meta-defining and a truly crazy Pokemon. There was no way to stop its powerful attacks like Fake Out or Double Edge or Return. One of the few ways to beat it would be to trap it with Mega Gengar. Mega Gengar could use Shadow Tag to prevent Mega Kangaskhan from switching and then use Shadow Ball to outspeed and hit it super effectively. The strategy works because Kangaskhan's Sucker Punch is not very effective. Mega Kangaskhan reveals two very fundamental asymmetries in the inverse battle metagame, and we can use that to understand future generations. One is that normal types are completely ridiculous because they are unrestricted. Oftentimes when I say something is unstoppable, I mean it metaphorically, but here I mean it literally. In the modern Gen 9 metagame, almost every strong normal type is banned for being overpowered. Pokemon like Porygon Z, both Ursaluna forms, and even Mousehold are all banned. The second asymmetry is that immunities become super effective, but there's no inverse of an immunity. In other words, all immunities are gone. This has several knock-on effects. One is why Indeedee got banned. Indeedee could use Psychic Surge and Expanding Force. Importantly, its teammates could also take advantage of Psychic Terrain to use their own Expanding Force. Psychic Terrain Expanding Force is ridiculous because it's a 140 base power move, gets boosted by Psychic Terrain, and gets boosted by Stab if used by a Psychic type Pokemon. Ordinarily, it's kept in check by a Dark type Pokemon, but there is literally no way to keep it in check here. There is no type or ability that can make you immune to Psychic. The sheer base power of Psychic Terrain Expanding Force is enough to overpower any fighting or poison type Pokemon. Indeedee was eventually banned for its overpowered Psychic Spam strategies. There's also a strategy where you use a Pokemon like Calm Mind, Iron Defense, Stored Power, and Rest. There are other variations like Iron Defense, Amnesia, Body Press, and Rest, but the idea is very similar. You create a Pokemon that boosts both special defense and defense. At the start, you're vulnerable and don't do a lot of damage, but by the end, you're unstoppable. Ordinarily, it's a very matchup fishy strategy. If you only have one attacking move, you become a useless Pokemon if there's an immunity. A stored power Pokemon is going to be playing 5 versus 6 if your opponent has a Dark type Pokemon. You're playing 5 versus 6 if you're using only Body Press and your opponent has a Ghost-type Pokemon. But because there's no immunity in inverse battle, these strategies go from matchup fishy to actually good. The metagame requires you to use a lot more Roar or Haze Pokemon to deal with these types of Pokemon. It's a subtle but distinct difference compared to standard play. Type immune abilities become high value because ability-based immunities exist outside of the inverse interactions. So Ogerpon Water with Water Absorb, for example, is one way to gain an immunity in the format. Unfortunately, as mentioned, there is no ability to make you immune to normal type attacks or psychic type attacks, or a lot of types for that matter. But if you do have one of the few type immune abilities, it is valuable to keep one on your team. And of course, we can't talk about inverse battles without talking about the actual types. Ice is the best defensive type in the game with a ton of resistances and a resistance to Stealth Rock. Accordingly, Avalugg is the best defensive Pokemon. It can leverage its high defense, amazing typing, and recover to shut down a lot of physical attacking Pokemon. On top of that, its rapid spin can't be blocked by Ghost-type Pokemon, so it's an effective hazard remover too. Similarly, Articuno is a great specially defensive Pokemon with its Ice typing and Roost. It also has access to Haze, which makes it a good way to stop those stored power Pokemon too. Blissey plus Avalugg and Alomomola plus Articuno are both pretty standard defensive team building cores because they both handle physical and special attacks together. On the other hand, Steel is so bad that Necrozma Duskmane is legal in the format. The Steel type is so crippling that Necrozma Duskmane and Dialga, two uber legendary Pokemon, are both unbanned. They are literally ranked as good Pokemon alongside Ambipom, but it cannot be understated how bad the Steel type actually is. Not only is it weak to almost everything, the types it's weak to are very common in the metagame like Normal and Grass. Speaking of Grass, Grass is a fantastic typing too. One of the main beneficiaries is Serperior. Contrary Leaf Storm means that every Leaf Storm increases your special attack, and that's brutal with Serperior's high speed and good typing. Rillaboom is actually banned for being a vanilla overpowered grass type Pokemon. With Grassy Surge, Woodhammer, and Grassy Glide, it was incredibly tough to stop, especially when paired with other grass type Pokemon, similar to how Indeedee was overpowered when paired with other psychic type Pokemon. Pokemon can be made immune to grass with the Sap Sipper ability, but no good Pokemon gets that ability. You'd have to use something terrible like Goodra if you really wanted to. Electric is an interesting type because there's no immunity to Electric besides Volt Absorb. The famous U-Turn plus Volt Switch combo is almost unstoppable, and the best Electric type Pokemon, Regieleki, is banned because of that strong Volt Switch. Most of the other types don't really have a major change. They're different but not excessively good or bad because of the type change. For most Pokemon, their viability is about the same as you would expect. And as promised, we do have to talk about Stealth Rock. Pokemon like Articuno take barely any damage from Stealth Rock, whereas Pokemon like Excadrill would take 50% from Stealth Rock. With heavy duty boots, that effect is still meaningful but not completely game changing. Really, all the type change does, it changes which Pokemon have to hold heavy duty boots. Let's take a look at the finals of a recent inverse battle tournament. The finals had two teams that looked like something you'd find in a typical standard battle. One side has a Sticky Web or Bombi team. It has an Ogerpon with Water Absorb and the Deadly Grass offensive typing. Similarly, there's the powerful Serperior and a Calm Mind stored power Reuniclus taking advantage of the fact there's no Psychic type immune in the format. On the other hand, the opponent has a Sun team with powerful Pokemon like Growth Venusaur. Venusaur is deadly because of the offensive combination of Grass type attacks and the Fire type Weather Ball. Great Tusk and Chi-Yu are great because of their sheer power and synergy with Sun, and Venusaur's type combo would be good even in standard play. Fire, Dark, and Ground Fighting are both about as good as they would be in standard play. The main difference is the presence of Brute Bonnet. Brute Bonnet is uniquely good here because of the Grass typing as mentioned earlier. Both teams actually have two Grass type Pokemon, and coincidentally there are no Normal type Pokemon, but that is the exception, not the norm. Overall, the inverse metagame is different, but not radically so. It's pretty interesting. What metagame do you want to see next? Let me know down in the comment section below.